Sophie moved with quiet rhythm, each motion steady, her focus absolute. She never spoke unless spoken to, never paused to rest. When offered a folded bill or a kind smile, she always answered the same, her voice calm, almost fragile, "Thank you, but I can't take this." There was no hesitation, no trace of pride, just certainty. Word of her refusal spread quickly through the staff, yet she remained the same, untouched by praise or doubt. From upstairs, Liam Hawthorne watched her through the still moments of his day. Something in her composure unsettled him. The way she carried herself, not proud, not timid, just contained, made him wonder what she was hiding behind that quiet. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more, but the thought of her lingered longer than it should have. Liam leaned closer to the flickering screen, watching Sophie move with the same quiet precision that had begun to feel unnatural. Every fold of linen, every polished surface, flawless. Too flawless. A dull ache stirred beneath his control, the echo of a memory he'd buried years ago. A woman's gentle voice, a warm smile, then the hollow sound of betrayal when the family safe was found empty. His father's words had branded themselves deep inside him, "Don't trust kindness. It always asks for something." Daniel, his assistant, broke the silence softly. "She's good at what she does, Liam. Maybe that's all it is." Liam's gaze never left the screen. His voice, low and steady, carried no warmth. The ones who smile the easiest lie the best. He watched Sophie straighten a chair that was already perfect, her calm expression betraying nothing. Then, almost to himself, he muttered, "Let's see how perfect she stays when no one's watching." The decision settled coldly in his chest. He would test her, and this time, there would be no room for illusions. Liam placed the wallet, the watch, and the neat stack of bills on the table with calculated ease. Every detail was deliberate, every angle planned. Then he lay back, eyes closed, breath measured, his body still but his mind sharp as glass. The cameras caught everything. He waited. The soft creak of the door broke the silence. Sophie's steps were light, her breathing steady. She paused, just long enough for him to know she'd seen the money. His chest tightened. She moved closer, not to reach, but to continue her work, her movements calm, careful, unhurried. He could feel his heartbeat pounding against his ribs, a mix of anticipation and dread. She was inches away now. All she had to do was touch it, prove him right, confirm what he already believed, that no one was truly innocent. But she didn't. She simply kept cleaning, her focus unbroken. Liam's pulse quickened anyway. Waiting, measuring, testing, this was his world. Yet for the first time, he realized he wasn't sure what he wanted to see. Sophie moved around the table, her eyes flicking once toward the money before lowering again. Her fingers brushed the cloth, dusting the edges as if the cash didn't exist. The quiet stretched until even her breath felt too loud. Liam's pulse thudded in his ears. He waited for the sound of paper moving, for the betrayal he prepared himself to hear. Her hand paused above the bills, still, weightless, undecided. Then she reached past them, picked up a book from the nearby shelf, and laid it gently over the money, as though protecting it from sight. Liam's chest tightened. She turned, lifted the folded blanket from the armchair, and walked toward him. He forced his body to stay motionless as she leaned closer, draping the blanket over his shoulders with soft, deliberate care. Her fingertips brushed lightly against his hair. Then came her whisper, fragile but certain, "Thank you for giving me this job. I won't let you down." The words pierced through everything he'd built to keep himself distant. Guilt struck first, then something heavier, something he hadn't felt in years. Awe. He kept his eyes closed, but the moment burned into him, sharp and irreversible. Liam sat in the dim glow of his monitors, the room silent except for the soft hum of replaying footage. Over and over, the same moments looped, her stillness beside the table, the careful way she covered the money, the blanket, the whisper. Each time, his chest tightened a little more. There was no hesitation in her, no calculation. Just quiet honesty. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on her face frozen mid-motion. Maybe she saw the camera, he murmured, the words hollow even as he said them. He knew better. Nothing about her had been performed. It was real, too real. He tried to look away, but the image pulled him back. Something fragile and unfamiliar pressed against the walls he'd built around himself. For the first time in years, Liam Hawthorne wasn't sure what to believe. And beneath that uncertainty, buried deep but alive, something stirred, a feeling he had almost forgotten how to feel. Days passed, and Liam began to notice what he had never taken the time to see. A blanket folded over the chauffeur's shoulders after he'd fallen asleep in the car. A dripping faucet that had somehow stopped leaking. A small note left by the back door, written in careful handwriting, left extra fruit for Mrs. Green. She's been craving peaches. No signature. No mention. Just quiet acts of care that asked for nothing in return. He watched from a distance, each small gesture striking deeper than he wanted to admit. The woman he had tested without mercy was revealing more of herself without even knowing it. She wasn't performing goodness. She lived it. Something inside him began to shift, slow and reluctant, like a door long sealed beginning to open. He tried to push it back, but the feeling wouldn't fade. It wasn't admiration, not yet, it was something he barely recognized anymore. Trust. And to a man who had built his life on control, that feeling was far more dangerous than any lie could ever be. Sophie stood motionless, her fingers tightening around the small handkerchief as though it burned to touch. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke, each word breaking the silence that had trapped her. "I used to work at a nursing home," she began, her breath unsteady. "There was a patient, Mr. Ellis. One night he collapsed. The ambulance was late, so I gave him my blood. It saved him." She paused, her throat tightening. A few days later, someone reported a gold cross missing from his drawer. "They found it in the laundry cart I used. I didn't take it. I don't even know how it got there." She swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Since then, when people accuse me, I don't explain. I just leave." The words cut straight through Liam's chest, leaving no space for doubt, no room for pride. For the first time, he saw her, not the silence, not the restraint, but the weight she'd carried just to stay standing. He stepped closer, his voice low, unpracticed, almost foreign. "You're not going anywhere." Sophie looked up slowly, eyes glistening, as if unsure she'd heard him right. But he meant every word. For the first time, Liam Hawthorne chose to believe without proof. The next morning, Liam found her in the corridor, her hands busy with folded linens. He said her name softly, and she looked up, startled but calm. "Walk with me," he said. She followed without question, quiet as always. They stopped where no one else ever went. He turned to her, his voice unsteady, the armor gone. "I owe you more than an apology," he said slowly. "I doubted you because I thought silence meant guilt. But you taught me something else." His gaze met hers, steady now, stripped of the distance that once guarded him. "The kindest people say the least." Sophie didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said she understood. And in that still moment, Liam saw her differently, not as someone beneath him, not as someone he had tested, but as the quiet truth he had spent years overlooking. For the first time in his life, faith didn't feel naive. It felt human. Liam started appearing in the small kitchen during morning tea, something he had never done before. The first time, the room fell silent. Without saying much, he poured himself a cup, then quietly poured one for Sophie. She hesitated, unsure if it was meant for her, but he only nodded and waited. The next morning, he did the same. By the third, she sat beside him without a word. Little by little, the space between them changed. The invisible walls that had always separated command from service began to blur. Conversations became easier, smiles unguarded. For the first time, Sophie didn't feel like she had to disappear to be accepted. One afternoon, Liam called her into the library. The shelves stretched endlessly, filled with books untouched for years. He handed her a small notebook and said simply, "I trust your judgment." No explanation, no conditions. Just that. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. To anyone else, it might have been a task. But to Sophie, those 4 words were everything she had quietly worked for, proof that she was finally seen, not for what she did, but for who she was. The storm came without warning. The lights went out, and the halls fell into uneasy silence. Liam grabbed a flashlight and moved through the dark, the sound of wind pounding like a heartbeat in the walls. Then he saw her, Sophie, standing by the cracked window, rain streaming down her arms as she pressed a towel against the glass to keep the water out. Her dress clung to her, her hair loose and dripping. He stepped forward before he could think, slipping his jacket from his shoulders and wrapping it around her. She tried to protest, but her voice faltered. He didn't let her speak. "Come on," he said quietly. His hand found hers, not commandingly, but steady, warm. He led her down the corridor until they reached the small emergency kitchen, where one light still flickered weakly against the storm's rhythm. Sophie stood near the counter, arms crossed under his jacket, eyes lowered. Liam poured 2 cups of water, his movements slow, deliberate. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them shifted, no tension, no suspicion, only the fragile calm of 2 people too tired to hide. He looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him eased. For the first time, Liam Hawthorne felt the walls around his heart begin to give way. The rain pressed against the windows like it was trying to speak, steady and relentless. Liam watched the drops trace lines down the glass before turning toward her. His voice came low, almost uncertain. "Why did you stay?" Sophie looked up, her expression calm but tired. She hesitated, then spoke so quietly he almost missed it. "Because no one has needed me like this place does. I didn't want to leave while someone who's still hurting is pretending he isn't." Her words landed with a weight he couldn't escape. He looked at her and saw no judgment, no demand, only truth. The defenses he'd spent years perfecting fell apart with one breath. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to be soft with people," he admitted. Sophie stepped closer, her eyes steady. "You don't have to know," she said gently. "You just have to feel it." Neither moved for a long moment. The sound of the storm faded to a distant rhythm. Between them, something unspoken formed, a quiet understanding that didn't need words, only the shared relief of finally being seen. Weeks later, the house buzzed with quiet order as the evening unfolded. Sophie moved through the night with steady grace, checking lists, guiding guests, her voice calm and sure. Every detail was seamless, every request answered before it was spoken. Liam watched from a distance, his expression unreadable, though something in his eyes softened each time she passed. When the music lowered and the room settled, he stepped forward to the microphone. His voice carried easily, but there was a warmth in it that hadn't been there before. "I've spoken at many events like this," he began, "about plans, numbers, success. But tonight, I want to speak about something else, someone who reminded me that goodness doesn't announce itself." A hush swept through the room. He paused just long enough to let the words find their place. "Real strength," he continued, "is quiet. It lives in small actions, done when no one's watching." From across the hall, Sophie froze. No one else noticed the slight tremor in her hands or the way her breath caught. She met his gaze for a moment, just long enough for him to see her eyes glisten, then looked down, holding the emotion in her chest where it would stay, safe and silent. When the applause faded and the guests turned back to their laughter and wine, Liam crossed the room without hesitation. Sophie was still standing near the entrance, clipboard in hand, pretending to busy herself with notes she no longer needed. He stopped in front of her, his voice soft. "You handled everything perfectly." Before she could respond, he held out a small velvet box. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver star pendant, its edges worn smooth from years of touch. She recognized it instantly, it had belonged to his mother. Liam's tone lowered, steady but full. "Those who keep light in their hearts will always find their way." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The pendant rested in her palm, glinting softly under the chandelier's glow. He didn't explain, didn't need to. His eyes said everything. He had finally learned to trust, not through wealth or power, but through her quiet truth. Sophie blinked back tears, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't voice. She simply nodded once, the gesture small but certain. Between them, words had become unnecessary. Sophie found the letter tucked beneath the morning paper, folded neatly, her name written in careful ink. Her hands shook as she opened it. The first line stopped her breath. "Congratulations, you have been awarded a full nursing scholarship. Someone believed in you." She read it twice, then again, her vision blurring at the edges. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. Every word carried his voice, measured, steady, quiet. The same kind of care that never asked for thanks. Later that day, she found him in the study. "I think I'll be leaving soon," she said, her tone steady but soft. He looked up, a faint smile touching his lips, though his eyes gave him away. "If one day you ever want to come back," he said gently, "the house will still be here." "So will I." 2 weeks later, she stood at the gate, her suitcase beside her. The early light touched her face as she turned for one last look. Behind her, the house stood calm and still, yet it felt different now, alive in a way it hadn't been before. She took a slow breath, her chest both heavy and free. What began as silence had become something deeper. She had left her mark, not in the rooms she cleaned, but in the heart she had helped remember how to feel. Then she walked away, carrying that quiet strength with her into the dawn. 6 months passed before she returned. The air carried a quiet chill, and the garden glowed faintly under autumn gold. Liam knelt among the lavender, trimming the stems with careful hands. He didn't hear her steps, only the voice that reached him from behind, soft but sure. "Still can't keep those lines straight." He froze, the shears still in his hand. When he turned, she was there, smiling, the same calm light in her eyes. In her hands, a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. She handed it to him without a word. He untied the string and unfolded the paper slowly. Inside lay a new handkerchief, simple but elegant, the stitching precise. Embroidered in gold thread were 2 names side by side, Liam and Sophie. He looked up, speechless, but she only smiled, her gaze steady. "This time," she whispered, "I want you to keep it." Later, they sat together in the kitchen, the same one that had once been filled with stormlight and silence. Now it was warm with laughter, quiet conversation, and a peace neither of them had known how to find before. The walls that had guarded so much emptiness now carried the sound of something new, something that felt like belonging. For the first time, the house wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs. And in that final quiet, without needing to say a word, both knew they had come home. Twilight pressed softly against the windows, the last trace of light slipping into evening. Sophie's gaze drifted toward the faint glow of the storm lantern on the sill. It flickered once, then again, as if testing whether to stay or fade. Liam stood beside her, watching the small flame dance between brightness and shadow. He drew a slow breath, turning toward her, a thought forming on his lips. But he stopped. The words hovered there, unspoken, caught between fear and something far deeper. Sophie met his eyes, a question and an answer passing in silence. Neither moved. The air grew still, dense with everything they hadn't yet said, the promises, the doubts, the tenderness neither dared name. The lantern flickered once more and steadied, its light thin but steady. Liam's hand twitched, almost reaching for hers, but he didn't. The moment held, unfinished, fragile, alive. Then everything fell quiet. The sound, the breath, the distance, all suspended in one final pause. What comes next, only they know.